Hi everyone, I'm Doug Bamford, and this video is prompted by some things I've heard, particularly over the summer. There was this discussion about the concern that net zero is getting a lot of backlash. It's a bit of an unpopular sort of idea and policy, and that maybe it's something that needs to be sort of given up on and instead different kind of terminology used. And so, yeah, I've been meaning to sort of give my thoughts on that, and I guess starting with explaining it really. So, what's the worry? Well, it's this concern that there's a kind of a branding problem for net zero, and maybe it's got something to do with the fact that just zero sounds bad to people. So, in general, no one wants zero of anything. You want more of everything, don't you, as a human being? So that might be one thought. Might seem a bit strange though, because you might think, well, if it's something bad, then isn't zero of the bad thing a good thing? So what about zero murders? Wouldn't that be great? Or zero floods, or having zero heart attacks, and having zero climate-induced kind of social, economic, environmental breakdown or something like that. Wouldn't that be great? But then I think on the other hand, if we then do think about those examples, generally they're actually expressed and turned around in presented as being positive things. So people talk about sort of security or health in terms of heart attacks or safety in terms of not being a victim of a flood or something like that. So maybe that is actually something that's being done for other kinds of bad things. Politicians like to talk about positive things instead. Maybe if we could think about the concern about environmentalism generally, there's this worry that kind of environmentalism is linked with sort of going without, isn't it? And so people have this kind of association in their mind with maybe something like poverty or something like that. Maybe that you have to be kind of cold and uncomfortable and not heat your house very well, if you want to not cause environmental harms and that sort of thing. So maybe it's not being able to have fun and just do whatever you want because you're worried about what the consequences will be. And the photo I've got here is one that I found of something called a hair shirt. And this was something I was sort of loosely aware of, but I've looked it up, and it was a thing that Christians used to wear in the Middle Ages as like a kind of part of their process where they'd be really uncomfortable and think about all their sins and all the ways that they've done things wrong and that sort of thing. And so there's this association with that kind of thing with the environment as well. Like, oh, aren't I terrible? I'm causing all this harm to the natural world and future generations, and so I should kind of feel really bad about that. And maybe there is, in some cases, some environmentalists are a bit like that. So maybe there is something in this kind of association, but that doesn't mean that all environmentalism is like that. It's just, an association that in some cases might have a bit of truth to it. So I guess, yeah, the response to that, I guess I would say that generally what we're speaking about with things like, net zero is having an energy transition. And often that means moving to a kind of a better energy system, a system that would be better for society and a better way of doing things, a higher kind of standard of living, albeit one that you have to pay for some improvements in the short term and then get the improvements over a longer period. So it might seem like an expense when you're looking at it from that upfront cost. And it does require people to kind of understand about the different types of energy systems you could have. And as I say, that sort of major investment that you have to make up front to, build all of these, say, wind turbines, which cost a lot to build, but then once they're built, they're providing you with electricity. You don't have to put any fuel in or anything like that. Then, that's great, but you do have to find that money when you first install them. So we can think about the ways that climate change might, though, be different to some of those other, negative things that we were talking about. Obviously, in general, climate change is this concern. We're producing these greenhouse gases by burning fossil fuels, and our agricultural practices are the main culprits, really, but mostly burning fossil fuels. And the gases that we're producing, they're invisible, but they're causing harms to like natural processes and ecosystems, and ultimately causing harms to people as well, and usually indirectly. And so climate change is an unusual case because there's something called offsetting. So you can do things which reduce even the amount of greenhouse gases in the air. If you sequester them, you can suck them out of the air. And so people talk about one example of this, which is the fact that just trees, right, and plants, when they grow, they're actually absorbing CO2, albeit very slowly. So it's quite a slow process. So you can't rely on this to do anything very quick. And also, a worry about this is that if the trees kind of fall down, then the carbon gets released back to the atmosphere when they rot. So you have to kind of make sure that that doesn't happen. Make sure that they kind of keep their woody nature, maybe get buried or something like that. And also, if they burn down in a forest fire, we're getting more and more forest fires with climate change. And obviously, if they burn, then the carbon just gets released straight back into the atmosphere. That's that process of burning that we're worried about with the fossil fuels. The fossil fuels are just old forests that we're now digging up and burning the carbon. So it's not really a straightforward panacea, but it is something that makes climate change a bit different to other problems, perhaps, because there are things that you can do to suck out the greenhouse gases, at least CO2. And then there are other ways that you can remove greenhouse gases and to store them. So technically, just like we can take gases like methane out of the ground and burn them, you could do it the other way around. So if you take CO2 out of the ground, you can then inject that back in, just as, someone sucked out the methane. It's probably easier to pull things out of the ground than to push things back in because of the pressure difference. But it is technically possible. It doesn't happen because it would be really expensive to do this. And so maybe another idea is you could turn the carbon in the air back into a fuel. So you make petrol, ethane or something like that, but then you bury it in the ground instead. And that takes a huge amount of energy, basically. Even just capturing CO2 in the first place, let alone capturing it and then doing extra processes to like kind of do the reverse of the combustion process to turn it back into a liquid or something like that, and then to bury it. So that's going to be super expensive, really difficult. Obviously, it doesn't happen at the moment, but in theory, that kind of thing is possible. And so I think that this is one reason why we can say that, this idea of net zero, it makes more sense for the problem of climate change than it does for other kinds of, social and environmental issues that there might be, because there is this kind of possibility that you could offset or substitute in some sort of way for the emissions that you're producing and contributing to. So that's the basic reason why we have net zero anyway, rather than kind of just an absolute gross zero, although some environmentalists might think that gross zero is the way to go for whatever reason, but we're talking about net zero here. So, another thought is that actually the problem isn't that people don't understand the term net zero, it's that they do understand it, but they just dislike it. And so, yeah, certainly there'll be some opponents of net zero who understand it perfectly well, but they work for fossil fuel companies, or they work for countries that make a lot of money selling fossil fuels out into the world, or they are people who have very high carbon footprints and they would prefer not to have to pay to make up for the pollution that they're causing if they do a lot of air travel or something like that. So, yeah, there could be cases where it's not a matter of misunderstanding or something like that. It's a case of being aware of it, but just not wanting to pay the costs of the pollution that's being contributed to. Because after all, paying for your pollution is more expensive than the alternatives. If the alternative is, you get someone else, you pay them when you pollute, you pay a fee or a tax or something like that, and someone else cleans up on your behalf. Well, obviously, then you have to pay something that people have been kind of getting away with not paying. So it seems like a big increase in costs. But the other alternative is that you don't pay and no one pays to clean up. And then you're just passing on the costs to the future victims of climate change. So someone's paying. People who are making money or, enjoying their lives using the fossil fuels, they want someone else to pay. And so it's not a case of failure of understanding in that case. It's a case of just kind of selfishness, really, isn't it? I guess there's one thought that this kind of negative attitude to net zero that's maybe slightly increased in recent times, that indicates that there's a general opposition to engaging in the energy transition or doing something about climate change. But actually, if you don't use the term net zero, if you use other various terms like climate action or doing more to tackle climate change, then that's very popular. People do see climate change as a major issue for humanity and the world, the earth. And so they would like something to be done about it. I guess it's just then a case of what exactly should be done and can we get someone else to pay for it and not have to pay for it ourselves? Obviously, if someone else is paying for it, everyone's going to be in favor of it. It's when you have to pay that it maybe gets a bit more tricky. But yeah, the support is very strong for things like climate action, and people thinking that their governments should do more to tackle climate change. And you can see this map here from Our World in Data. They've got several maps like this on a page where they show that various questions people want more to be done to limit climate change. So it's not that there's opposition to these things generally. It's maybe a bit more net zero isn't as popular as other things. And so, yeah, why is that? What is the problem? Is it that people are just too stupid? Obviously, there's people who understand it, but they're selfishly going against it, and then other people who don't like it because it sounds bad. Maybe the idea is they don't understand it. And I would say I have to believe that people aren't just too stupid; they can never understand it, right? So I don't take that view. I work in adult education. I'm all about kind of, trying to spread understanding about things. And I've come to understand net zero over time as I've learned about it. So other people can too. And, just because people don't understand it at the moment, maybe they don't understand climate change, complex thing, right? You have to put in some effort and thought and do the research and the learning. That doesn't mean that people can't understand it. Obviously, we've got the problem that there's a huge kind of disinformation and misinformation campaign going on from those who don't like responding to climate change for whatever reason. So that it's battling that. But I don't think it's a case of people just not having the ability to understand climate science. There's some very good explanations out there of it. But, we do have this kind of question niggling at us that does net zero need to be kind of just abandoned as a term and rebranded as something else? And, there's various possibilities, like maybe having climate action or a clean energy future or a safe future. That's making it sound a bit more positive, isn't it? We want to have clean energy, we want to have safety in the future. So would that be better? And my worry about this is that it's missing something potentially by abandoning net zero. But yeah, maybe people don't kind of fully understand the difference between net zero and gross zero. So is it just a case of keeping going with net zero and trying to explain that it's not quite as strict as having gross zero, like some environmentalists want, where no one's allowed to pollute anything? It's saying, look, okay, if you want to pollute, that's fine, but you have to kind of pay a fee for that, a pollution tax or something, or you're expected to get someone to do something to make up for the pollution that you're causing. So yeah, so what do you think about this issue then? Do you feel like people are too stupid for net zero? Is that what the problem is? Is the net zero framing or terminology a problem in itself? There's this kind of doomer narrative that's been spreading around, isn't there? That humanity's just doomed because we're too stupid or we're too ignorant or we're too selfish or something like that. So we're just going to do these damaging things because, you know, that's it's part of our nature, the way we evolved or something like that wasn't in a way that could deal with these global issues. And so we're doomed to destroy the world that we rely on for our, lives and everything. So, yeah, I think that doomer narrative is actually being kind of emphasized by people who want people to lose hope and to do nothing. And so I remain hopeful that it is actually perfectly possible to do something about these things. Lots of people are putting in a lot of time and effort and money to reduce their own carbon footprint and to help others to do so as well. And so, yeah, is net zero the problem? Or do we just need to really keep going and just try to explain to more and more people what this is about and what the point of it is and why people are so concerned about this issue and think that net zero is really important? So, yeah, do share your comments on this topic and yeah, I look forward to reading them.